All right. Good afternoon. I'm Martha Johnson, director of the Maier Museum of Art at Randolph College, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Outten Visiting Artist Lecture. Before we get started, on behalf of our institution, I would like to acknowledge that the land Randolph College occupies was inhabited by Yessa, the people, but due to warfare, disease, forced migration, assimilation, and broken treaties, the people were reduced in numbers and were forced to a fraction of the land that they once occupied. Today, descendants of the original people of the land, the Monicans, quote, understand that the land is the people and the people are the land, and we are not strangers on any of the land that was once considered our territory. The Outten Visiting Artist Lecture Series was established in 1993 by Helen Wolfe in memory of her sister, Mary Jane Wolfe Outten, class of 1927, to assist in promoting the Maier Museum of Art and its efforts to obtain outstanding visiting artists and lecturers. Additional funding for the exhibition, Anne Holsberry, Navigating Sea and Stars, has been generously provided by Nancy Gottwald, class of 1955, through her membership with the Maier Museum of Art. Nancy is an alum, former trustee, and a longtime member and supporter. If you're not already a member, we invite you to join us online or by picking up a membership brochure on the front desk. So many people deserve thanks for their roles in relation to this multi-dimensional project. First of all, Anne Holsberry, the artist we honor and celebrate today. We thank her classmates who together encouraged us to realize some appropriate form of collaboration with her. I thank President Suat Rowlands, who received an overture from members of the class of 1965, itemizing compelling reasons why recognition of this kind should be acted upon. I was copied on this document as well, although I had already been familiar with and admired Anne's work for many years. This past week has been filled with meaningful collaborations within our Randolph community. I thank Professors Andrea Campbell, Karen Warren, and Sarah Soika for their enthusiastic engagement, contagious to their students, many of whom were present and assisted Anne throughout the week. I would describe it as extraordinarily interdisciplinary, even for us. Our IT department as a whole is incredible, and in particular, we thank Michael Hester and Jerry Washburn over there. Say thanks, everybody. So these guys are always there for us, and they never roll their eyes, at least not in front of us. Thanks for that. Every member of our small but oh so mighty staff worked hard to make this happen. Each one contributed significantly in ways I cannot itemize now. Administrative Manager Kathleen Fort, Registrar Debbie Spanich, Gallery Monitor Melinda Wheeler. But John Spanich, our art handler and installer, also our guard, yes, many, many hats, must be commended for his dedication and professional expertise this week. I especially must thank our Curator of Education, Laura McManus, for taking the lead on Anne's week-long residency, coordinating myriad details and logistics. For this, Laura needs a special round of applause. I will now turn the program over to Laura.
Okay. Thank you, Martha. Good afternoon, everyone. It has been an absolute honor to work with artist Anne Holsberry during her week-long residency and to witness firsthand the depth of her talent, insight, and passion for the arts. And thank you for your generosity of time and spirit. I do have a few thank yous as well. I want to thank Jake LaFaso, our intern assisting in installation and archival work, work study student Elizabeth Bailey, Professor Andrea Campbell, and the students from Introduction to Museum Studies. As Martha mentioned, they all worked tirelessly to install this exhibition, doing whatever was needed, from setting up chairs while Anne was drawing on the wall, while John and Jake were installing exhibitions, while Elizabeth was hanging labels, while I was sweeping the floor, and on and on and on. So thank you all for doing the work and also remaining calm. I also want to thank Professor Karen Warren for identifying satellite images for weather events from this region, and the students from Special Topics in Marine Biology who met with Anne on Friday. It seems only fitting that for today's lecture, we do indeed have a weather event in progress. Today we have the privilege of hearing from an accomplished artist whose life and work exemplify creativity, determination, and an unwavering dedication to the arts. Anne Holsberry, a proud alumna of Randolph Macon Women's College, class of 1965, is a shining example of how a rigorous education can lay the foundation for a rich and multifaceted career. While at RMWC, she majored in fine arts and was deeply engaged in campus leadership, setting the stage for a life of purpose and artistic exploration. Anne began her career as an art educator in public schools, sharing her passion with young minds, which of course is close to my heart. She did this before expanding her academic pursuits to include a master's degree in urban and regional ecosystem planning from Cornell University and a law degree from Cornell and UC Berkeley. For over a decade, she practiced law in the San Francisco Bay Area, balancing her demanding career with her passion for painting and raising her son as a single mother. Eventually, Anne embraced her artistic calling full-time, focusing on the transformative power of art and its connection to the body and mind. Her practice expanded to include rosin method bodywork and movement, along with workshops in painting, process, and movement. For the past 2 decades, Anne has drawn inspiration from her time living and working in Paris, exploring themes of migration, both human and animal, and in her artwork. She has also found inspiration from the California Pacific Coast and the work of her husband, Gary Grimm, an environmental lawyer and partner in crime. She lovingly refers to Gary as a Kelp Wrangler. And indeed, that's what his name tag says. Anne's compelling work is a meditation on environmental changes that require humans and animals to adapt to new ways of navigating the world. Her work has been exhibited nationally and internationally, with solo exhibitions at esteemed venues like the Morris Graves Museum of Art and the Geese Museum of Art. Anne is a 2-time recipient of Berkeley Civic Arts grants, among other awards, and her pieces are part of public and private collections across the United States and Europe. Please join me in welcoming Anne Holsberry as she shares her extraordinary journey and the inspirations behind her creative process.
Sound.
All right, we are all set.
I'll turn this on.
Oh, yeah. There you go. And that's mine.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for the amazing introduction. And yes, it's just great to be here. I'm so grateful to everyone at the college and all the people who've been already named, who've made this all possible for me to be here this week. I'm also very excited to talk to you today about the work that I'm going to do. For starters, I'm always asked, well, how do you make these things? So I have a brief video that I'd like to share with you that will give you some idea of my background and my process in making the work that you'll see today. And so I think we're ready for the video. My work is a direct collaboration with the forces of nature. I experiment with sunlight, water, and natural materials to create large-scale cyanotype prints. I begin my process outdoors, where I'm inspired by the materials I find in my surroundings. I then move to the darkroom, where I apply UV-sensitive iron salts to silk, canvas, or paper. Next, I lay the work out in the sunshine, arrange the kelp on the surface, and expose it for 15 to 20 minutes. Where certain materials block the light, a white shadow is left behind. I then wash out the leftover iron salts in water. As I hang the work to dry, the final print gradually begins to emerge. In addition to beaches, I work in the Central Valley of California, where I'm inspired by the annual journey of migratory birds. This piece was made with actual bird wings found in wildlife sanctuaries. I use the process of cyanotype to evoke the power of flight. For this exhibition, I created an immersive experience. I work as large as I can in order to show the size of the sea kelp and to give viewers the mesmerizing sense of swimming underwater. I also work as small as I can. I add embroidery to invite viewers to observe microscopic details of nature. My work is a celebration of the natural order of things, nature's beauty and resilience, our interconnections, and our love of wild places. I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida, where I was surrounded by and spent much time on the beaches and waterways of that area. And I was very impressed by the importance of water in our lives. I also, well, to say this, probably people can relate to this. My childhood was not always idyllic. And so I had difficult times, and I very early sought solace in nature. I also saw at a very early age that I could use art to help me create these universes that I could escape into. I also had a super adventuresome spirit. So that has led me on a lot of journeys, and to this day, I'm still kind of searching and seeking out places. I also was really influenced by the culture of New Orleans, which was our closest large city. I went there at a very young age, and I just loved everything French about it. It was my window onto the world. So I started studying French at a very young age. I went on to study in college, and then one summer I went with a group of women students who went to Europe and ended up studying in Paris for the summer. Well, that was life-changing. After that, it was La Vie en Rose. And I've returned there very often. I'm now, well, to say more about New Orleans, there's that connection with going to France, and then I have worked and studied in France. I now go twice a year, actually, to work and study there and to absorb the art and the culture in New Orleans. We also have our son and his wife who live in Germany, so we're able to connect with them also. And let's see, the influences of all of that have been very important. For 2 decades, I've been doing that actually. In the last 2 decades, we've been going there. And then it's kind of interesting because ultimately, this migratory journey back and forth has led me to question, and look at the whole situation of migration between people and animals back and forth. Let's see. So my work has been focused on the fragility of the inland waters. I'll go back in time. Again, I've sort of taken you forward to what I'm doing in Paris. Back in time, after high school, I graduated, came north, studied at Randolph Macon Women's College. As we say, vita abundantia, or what a basis in art history, French, everything that I had that was my foundation. I taught art in public schools for several years and then continued my journey northward to Cornell. So I studied design, there was historic preservation, but then eventually it became like a big study of environmental ecosystems. I was still working on my master's thesis when I also went over into the law school. It was the idealistic 60s, and those of you who lived through the 60s know what that was like. It was 68 when I went to law school. You know what was happening then, the marches, the shutting down, everything. So I also was very interested in going to law school. I come from a family of lawyers, so I know how to think that way, and it still is part of my organizing, knowing how things work in the world. So then from that point, going to law school, then I moved to the Bay Area to San Francisco and was raising my son part of the time when I was working there. I began to expand my interest during that period of time in kind of the inland waters and also the Pacific coast in California. At that point, to go back a little in time also, when I first was there working, this was when I met my husband, Gary Grimm. We were both working on a case together. I was the lawyer for the East Bay Park District, and Gary was the lawyer for the San Francisco Water Board. We were both going after the same developer who was polluting the waters in the park. So it was, a really important collaboration that we were able to resolve that case. After that case resolved, I began to accompany Gary to see different water cleanup sites, things that he's very involved in. I also went with him to the Central Valley of California, where we go now every January to see the migratory birds who come down from the Arctic and down from Canada to spend their winters there. So this all started becoming very important in my artwork. It was like inspiration and kind of nature as muse and material, I say. I was using different things in the environment that I was collecting to use in some of the artwork. And we'll point out some of the things in just a minute about how I've worked with all of that. Also, you can see that these big pieces are two-person jobs. And so this is where Gary works alongside me a lot. This is the Kelp Wrangler part, where he's finding the kelp on the beaches. He's also helping carry equipment down, helping, sometimes he's telling me where the tides are coming in so we know where the water's going to hit the beach, helping me carry things actually into the ocean and then to really collaborate with the waves and the wind and get the wave action. Then we pull them back on the beach. He's also holding a big tarp over me when I'm underneath trying to lay things on it. And anyway, here's Gary. Yeah. And the teamwork continues. I mean, we're very much engaged in doing a lot of work today. In that period, I guess it was 2016, that we began to see the absence of kelp, bull kelp in particular, on the shores. And there was also a decimation of the nearshore ecosystems where the kelp beds grow. So it was like an alarm. We really were, alarmed about this. And I realized I needed to document this. So began, first of all, I changed my material. Usually you prepare paper with the UV sensitive material. You saw some of that in here. And this was the process I was following at the time, where I would go into the studio darkroom, wherever it was, after I found the materials. Usually you do it ahead of time, but we would have to find the kelp on the beaches even. This is what we would use for printing. Then I would go in the middle of the night into my studio. This is up on the Mendocino coast. I have a rural space there where I work, and prepare the silk. Actually, I switched to silk because it was much easier to prepare. First of all, it was really long. I've got some pieces that are 18 to 20 feet long, and I was able to prepare it, roll it up, take it to different locations, and you can see, does it show up on our camera? It was also really this is one that's had some other kinds of kelp printed on it. It was also really translucent, and so you get the feeling of the sort of the underwater kelp beds, the fragility, the sense of being in the midst of the kelp beds. Here's another one that I'd printed with some of the bird wings that I can tell you about in just a minute. I realized that I had to improvise and change the way I was working. So this was when I started using the silk. And then it was not even sure that there would be sunlight the next day. So it was all this kind of running a marathon, getting ready, and then finding enough UV at some time, or moving the things around on the ridge to find where we were behind the fog belt to get in the sunshine to actually print. And so then the process went on from there. I also found that it was really a time that, well, given all the weather conditions, it was a time that there'd be a lot of surprise and maybe even a potential for failure. So one thing I wanted to show you, and I'll show you shortly up on the screen, I thought, for instance, that I had ruined a piece. You'll see this when it comes up on the screen, and this is one of the brochures that's here. I had overexposed it, and it was dark, and I thought, oh, I've ruined this. Then the next day I went and looked at it, and I started seeing some of the imagery, like, wow, is this what it looks like from deep space looking down at the Earth? Or is this some kind of ganglia formation in the brain? Is it microcosm, macrocosmic? But I began working with it, and I started adding points of light. I took it's basic household materials that can change the cyanotype process. So I started adding some bleach and ammonia, and you can see started adding some kind of light coming through, and then started adding some navigation lines. So I'll show you these shortly. It kind of made me aware I had to be able to deal with chance also, just kind of to embrace the fact that this is what was being offered and how to deal with it. So I work a lot, and some things don't work out, some things do, but the next video will show you some about why. This one I call the video that says how I make things. This video that we're going to see next is why I make them, and some new directions. So.
Coastal waters have always been important to me. My experience growing up on the beaches and waterways of the Gulf Coast of Florida has been central to my work. In my art, I've always been drawn to create alternate universes and other realms I can enter. I love making art on a large scale and being immersed in the work. Field studies and observation in nature are often my starting points. This work first began when I noticed the gradual disappearance of kelp on California beaches. I realized I needed to document this loss to call attention to nearshore ecosystems threatened by ocean warming. I started gathering materials from beaches, which included kelp as well as the remains of the invasive purple sea urchins that feed on it. With these, I made large-scale prints via sun exposure on silk coated with a UV-sensitive emulsion. In these large installations, viewers can enter and be transported into this mesmerizing underwater world, surrounded by at-scale representations of massive kelp forests. At the beginning of the pandemic, I began embroidering items of personal significance into my large silk pieces as a way of processing collective and personal grief. When the silk pieces were hung inside the large front windows of the David Brower Center in Berkeley, I continued the process. In these more recent pieces that depict sea kelp and its predators, I have added embroidery to emphasize the minute details of nature. These pieces were hung alongside two large canvases in the two-story atrium of the David Brower Center. As I have thought about the absence of kelp forests in the ocean and the richness and resilience of the ocean floor, I've started imagining emerging life forms and multi-species evolution. To focus on both the power and fragility of the ocean, I carried large cyanotype-coated canvases into the ocean. There they were doused with seawater to capture the dynamic action of wind and waves. Once printed, I took them to my studio and added embroidery details. Tide pools contain both depth and surface and often reflect the sky, clouds, and stars above. They reveal the movements of the moon and planets that affect the tides as they are filled by these tide waters in an intermingling of visible and invisible forces. Some of my works imagine bioluminescence in the deepest reaches of the ocean, an explosion of beauty in a dark and inhospitable environment. In my recent work, I've expanded my focus to include the more common forests of the land alongside the unseen forests of the sea. I'm inspired by the richness of the redwood and oak forests and their meadows, which are part of the beautiful ecosystem near the Mendocino coast, close to various nearshore kelp restoration projects. In the forest, I've been exploring interspecies communication and the rich and complex interconnections, vegetation, fungal mycelium, and the root and canopy systems of groups of trees. While contemplating the ways in which the oceans are changing, I embroidered botanical-based fabrics from coastal Mexico into this canvas, which itself was printed in the forest. It serves as a reminder of increasing environmental strain, with humans and animals alike forced to migrate due to loss of home and habitat. The protection of oceans and other natural habitats is essential for all species worldwide in an ever more connected world.
So this is our navigation wall that we've been working on this week. I can point out, first of all, let me point out the piece that I thought was ruined became this piece. And you can see where I started adding things to it. I also took it to a printer and had it printed over, this is an old vintage map that I had, which I had painted and given color to. I've used wax and sort of blurred out what it actually is, so you can't quite tell. It's kind of this mysterious old map. And then when I started adding the navigation lines, this is where the students came in, and they started continuing. Once this was up, we had started this, they continued these and painted and worked on some of these navigation lines coming out of here. I just kind of call them navigation lines. It's something like from the cosmos to the ocean, kind of my artistic interpretation. That really goes for what we did in the central area. This is what Dr. Karen Warren did, the research that was so important, the work. And one of the things that we focused on was this incredible polar dip. If she's here, she can probably correct me. She's pointed out actually in a snow drought in this Lynchburg area. When I arrived, I was told that it was 1,000 days since the previous snow in Lynchburg, and then this whole big thing happened January 6th and 7th. And so we were really focused on that. And this was coming in from the west, where this whole Arctic swooping down, you know, this whole polar dip was coming in that was coming, I guess this was maybe like the 6th or 7th at that point. Then we had an image of the snow cover. So this was precipitation, which she got in infrared and then some of the black and white, so we could see all of the storm that was happening at that time. So abstracted in a sense, so that it can visually be taken in, not to have all the details of what was happening. And that's when Dr. Warren said, so this is a snow drought that we were in, and then this is what is happening. So let's see, you can see some of the areas too where this continues on, and the students were here helping. It was really kind of amazing. I think you've seen pictures of that, or some of them were here, ladders and whatever they were doing to get in here and start adding some color at certain points. And so then Elizabeth was up here painting our cosmic shapes, and it just really took off from there. And so I just really appreciate the work that they did. Another one of the students who had been working with me the day before just showed up the next day and said, I'm here. And so she just, and I got in the zone, so I couldn't really talk about what I was doing, but she was just handing me things for about, 5 hours? You know, just, and so she would hold them, and it was just pretty amazing, you know, to have this kind of collaboration and this kind of support. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, it was just really fun doing this whole collaborative thing together. Some of the pieces here, I'll read you from my book. This one's called Kelp, and I take field notes. I'm experimenting always, and I take notes and then see what I did or what I want to do on another one. This was from July 29th, 1916. It was a Friday. So Ocean Beach out from California, San Francisco, it's called Ocean Beach there. I put the UV sensitive materials on both sides, so it was extremely heavily coated. There was a high haze, so the UV was mixed. It was partly cloudy, but then when we dipped it into the sun, probably we were both going into the water with this one, and pulled it up onto the beach where it could dry for about 4 hours because it was soaked and just needed to dry there. So then the sun came out in a full way. And I love how the really dark blue was saturated because it's just so saturated from both sides. Then I went on to other times, you know, and what I would do with another one. The other one is Ocean Beach number 2, so that was done at a different day. I don't exactly have my notes here. So it wasn't coated on both sides. I can peek behind and see. It was, just coated on one side, but the same procedure of, first of all, covering it, getting it into the ocean, and then letting the sun come out. And I may have washed that one out, or we may have washed these out in a shower back at the studio, as I recall. Yeah, back in my studio where I work in the San Francisco Bay region, one of my classmates came in and said, where do you work on all this? So I have a lot of different places where I work. One of them is in my painting studio. You saw some of it in the video, where the tall pieces where it's kind of not a huge studio, but I use it vertically in a lot of different ways. And so it's, I'm in a wonderful group of artists, actually, in our cooperative. They're live-work spaces. I'm not currently living there because it's too small. We live in a house in Berkeley. But it's actually, just to do a little side comment about that, it's a place where we have, it's nonprofit and the city helped us fund it, so we can offer studios for low to moderate income artists. And when people are ready to sell their studio, they don't sell it at market rates. They sell it back to the co-op, and we have this very strenuous application process so that artists can apply. So it's amazing because we own 3 buildings and they're not getting gentrified. You know, people love to follow the artists in the neighborhood and have a loft or something, but these are buildings we own, which is pretty wonderful in the Bay Area, so that we can continue and do a lot of work there. This one was done up on the beaches at Humboldt County, northern, and so it also had just the same thing. Yeah, it was just on one side that it was done. And then I added embroidery, which I love to do when I take things back to the studio. This is another one of the ones you can see that I had a map and had it printed the same way. And then I sometimes use things to print also. These are Mardi Gras beads, straight from my New Orleans connection. And on this one, you can see I painted with the cyanotype. At the same time, then I would have laid some of these kind of beads on it. So you can see those in here. And you'll see it in some other works around here. There's another one called over there that has the Mardi Gras bead prints. And then a found map that I had just found on the street, and so added to this whole thing. There's also, just to show you all the materials that I have right now, a shawl that has been laid on some of the work. So you'll see this on a couple of pieces in here that, 2 of these. You'll look out for those and you'll see the images. Those of you who are on live stream, that will come up soon to show you more of printing of the purple urchins. This you saw in the video. And this was a sun UV sensitive, colorful, not cyanotype, but Jacquard company makes something called Sunprint. And so I was able to actually print some of the sea urchins, but I'd also draw them, turn it into screen printing and print on them, and then also do embroidery with these. They're also, let me see. Some papers that I have prepared to take with me. So I would say, you can probably tell by now, I'm nomadic in nature, both in how I like to move around, the places I like to work, the Pacific Coast, my studio in the Bay Area. I travel and work. There's this period of time working in Paris. Then there are the outdoor studios and the outdoor spaces. I'm working in the woods and up on the Navarro Ridge. We're near an offshore kelp bed system. And I'm trying to think if there are other places where I've traveled with some papers that are the kind that school kids use. So you may have seen it. It's Sunprint paper. And so these were some that I took and did some printing near the Berlin Wall, which is an amazing migration story in itself. This is where the wall was, and I haven't assembled these so far to tell that story. I have others, though, that I've used these for. Let me see. So I prepared some papers when we went to, ahead of time. We went to the total solar eclipse in northern Oregon. What date was that? It was 2017, I think it was. We went in our VW van and camped up there. And it's incredible. If you ever get a chance to go to a total solar eclipse, it's really just the most powerful thing. You really get the feeling of what a tiny atom you are in this incredible cosmos. So the shadow of the moon was racing by. It was just incredible that I could feel myself on the planet. So I had some papers and rocks and an animal vertebrae, animal skeleton that were on the out there in the desert. So I put these out just during that period of time. And I think you can sort of see the light was just kind of surrounding everything. So these were from that period. So one of the first pieces that I made traveling with these papers was Lido. And those of you who, I think, can see that now on the live screen. Yeah.
I'm playing piano.
Here's our noble assistant over here. So you can see on there some of the shawl that was on some of them. I made this. This is one of my first traveling cyanotypes. And I made it in 3 different locations. In Italy, it was 2014, I guess, 2013. Italy, and it's called Lido because it was at Venice, and I went over to that beach, Lido, and in those days all I had was my raincoat sort of to put over me and make this. So Lido, then northern France, still in the same period where the migratory birds come in, up in Normandy, then back in Northern California and the Bay Area. So I was making the same kind of migratory recording. And then you can see there are little fine lines in it. So these lines were materials that I would gather, weeds or something that was there locally. And they start to represent the pattern, the flight of birds. And so then from that I added embroidery, and I think there's some rose petals I like to carry with me from France. I think that's what's been sprinkled on there. So Prima Materia was like one of the first that explored. I'm sorry, that's a different one. And Lido. So I mentioned the wrong one in the wrong place. But Lido, we're still looking at, was one of the first that I actually did and brought back. Then after Lido, there was traces. This one on the wall. So when we go to the migratory pathways in the Central Valley of California, we're often looking at the wild geese, the ducks there, and nearby to this observation area, and we love to be there either at dawn or the end of the day, so that color behind reflects some of the color of that time of day. Next door to where the wildlife preserve is, there's some days where the hunters are hunting, and that's part of the whole system. Their licenses pay some of the fees, and they're hunting, but we've gone to the area where they clean the ducks and the geese and have retrieved some of the wings, the geese and the duck wings, from their cleaning the carcasses. So then those have been used then on paper to make this image. And I have one of the few refrigerators you will find that has duck and geese wings up there, where most people, this is my studio refrigerator. Instead of ice cream and the usual, I keep those kind of things there because they're pretty rare and hard to find, and I like using them for this. So another piece,
This one here.
that one back there, flow, is when I carried prepared paper into the wildlife preserve and dipped it into the water where the ducks and the geese were swimming. So when you look at it more closely, you can see there's sort of suspended turbidity, suspended matter that's on them. And I never washed those out. I just left all that and have used wax to hold it on there. So that's one of the ones where I carried the papers with me. There was also, let me see, when was that? As you walk into the gallery, you saw, yes, through that door, you saw tidal glitter. And those are some papers that I carried into the ocean to record the sand and the sea and the wind. And that, then I was thinking at the time about the loss of life in sea and emerging hybrid algae, I guess. So I created some screen prints, and you'll be able to see those when you look at it. So they're printed on there, and then I added wax, I added ink, I added other types of meditative mark making, and then embroidery to that one. So let me see, are there any more to show? So I used found material also when I was creating Prima Materia, which is over here on this wall. Yeah, there was a book that I found in my travels that had mechanical drawings in it, and I just sort of used it imagining some kind of generative mechanical drawing. And then there are layers of paint and wax where I've added kind of dimension to that. It's a 49 panel piece that's really, the title is referring to the Big Bang, when the creation of everything, the original matter of the universe. So it's become like an exploration for me of all the delicate interconnections in the world, kind of the many unseen cosmologies. So there's Earth against sky, the immense planetary scale against the microscopic stratospheres and vast expanses of space. I also have a part of this I really love. One of my colleagues in the studio worked, and she's a master printer. She worked with Robert Rauschenberg at one point at Gemini Gel in LA, and part of her payment is that she's given some of the prints. And so she shared with me 2 Rauschenbergs, which are toward the center at the bottom, little black squares. So you'll enjoy seeing those. Let's see. So I'm fascinated with cosmologies. I seem to keep doing them. And there's one that you'll see over here on the side. This is Emergence Cosmology 9. Yeah, so that helps to explore and give shape to the universe. And I seek to represent all sorts of things in the universe that the cosmologies represent. And you'll see on that one the shawl that was put on there. And it's then little dots were added. I added to it. To go back in time a little bit, I brought you forward. Then back in time when I was first in California, I'm jumping around in time because this is an 80-year-old person here, so that a lot's gone on in my life. When I was first in California, I was always doing painting. I was doing process painting, which is a way of painting to use the process rather than the end result. And it's a way to really dive into the unconscious and to just let yourself be free without preconceptions to paint. Well, I was also at this time working through the rigors of having been a single mom, working full-time, just getting through that, raising my son, young son at that time. And so I started having some real physical difficulties. This sent me into a whole journey in the healing arts, which was self-healing. I found a type of body work called Rosen method body work. I did sessions that were very deep and profound and reveal unconscious material. And as I began to heal myself, I was really interested in learning it myself, so I studied and became a practitioner of the body work plus the movement. And then I started combining those into classes of the process painting. And so in my studio, sometimes in workshops, I would teach these workshops where we would begin with movement and then move into the painting. So it was a whole healing arts, intuitive approach to art that has allowed many people just to see how you can use art in all sorts of ways, not to have to know exactly what you're going to do with it. So the cosmologies, there's one more that I wanted to show you, which is Pink Moon. Right. So this image was taken from an old image I found in my travels. It was made from one of the earliest images from early telescopes. And then I had it printed onto regular archival paper. Once it was printed, I added cyanotype all around it. And you can see I've sprinkled some sand, so that printed also. Anything, as you know, that's laid on the cyanotype creates a white shadow. So you can see that very clearly there when the sun hits it. And so then that created the shadows. You can also see my love of painting. So I think it shows up in a lot of these, that I just love to splash and work with the materials. So some of these really show how I would paint and leave airy kind of images. Then I started adding lots of dots and sort of a meditative mark making that I engaged in there. So my interest in my cosmologies is that I really love representing the unseen energies that move the universe. The mysteries and the secrets of the universe are very interesting to me, both the visible, the unseen, the scientific, the surreal. It all sort of becomes one, and I'm really interested in representing the vast and the infinitesimal as a unified whole in my work. And I use a whole variety of materials to create all these cosmologies that you'll see. So I'd say ultimately in my work, I'm seeking to express the beauty of the natural world and the precariousness of the planet, and I seek to draw attention to the need for environmental awareness and protection of oceans and natural habitats. And I'd like to close by acknowledging some of what has supported me to do this, to be here. It's been pretty amazing. You've heard of the whole team of people. There's also a certain warmth that has happened. I mean, we both feel so welcomed and so held in this space. I'm saying this is the way that an artist should be treated, the kind of amazing respect and warmth that's been shown to me. So none of this would have been possible without the persistence and encouragement of my classmates, some of whom are here. The gracious assistance of Martha Johnson, who with a curatorial eye began to see and envision where things could go and look deeply into my work, the cosmologies. And the exhibition started growing from one small space to next door, and then it just sort of took over here. And there's Laura, who's taken care of my every need. As I've told her, I'm an introvert with social skills. So I desperately need time on my own, and she really helped me with that. You know, I need to recharge my battery at times. So Laura has been amazing, though out on searches for things I needed. We won't even tell you that she's been searching for me. So thank you, Laura. And this whole team here, who's just, I think they all have 2 full-time jobs at least, you know, so they're working really hard all the time. And then finally, it was a year ago that I met President Sue in the Bay Area when she came to alumni meeting. And she grabbed hold of me and grabbed hold of the idea and then sent it on to her team here. Anyway, in this year, it's been quite a ride. So, thank you.
And is this on still? Good. I think that Anne is welcome to entertain some questions. If you have any, I am going to come to you with a microphone so that those watching via live stream will be able to hear the question in full. So do we have any questions for Anne? Over here? Okay, great.
Could you tell us a little more about why you choose certain papers, whether it be how it's sourced or how it's actually made?
Yes. There are cyanotype is different than a lot of other materials, so you don't necessarily use archival paper. It likes kind of a neutral pH or a more acidic kind of pH. So that gives you a hint in some of the ways you deal with it. But I try to use ones that have like maybe pure cotton basis. not ones that have other mixtures in the paper. So Arche, the French one, is one of my favorites. So a number of these are the Arche paper. You'll just see them all around, and that's really worked well. So I think when it has sort of wood pulp or anything like that in the paper, that it will maybe darken or change color or something like that.
So you just try to stay away from dyes? So you try to stay away from dyes or any bleaches in general? Or like just...
Well, unless you want to experiment and use some, which I do.
Yeah.
And having said that, that sounds very pure about the paper you use. Then in traces, the top part is like paper that I was using to cover my tables in the studio, and it's working. So yeah, that's kind of a preferred type, but you can really use a lot of different kind of papers. When you're storing them, use glycine or something that's pH neutral, not the archival kind of paper.
Other questions?
When you were talking about the piece that kind of migrated with you over geography, can you tell us a little bit more about how you exposed it and preserved it to then expose it again? I was interested in that. Thank you.
The Lido piece. So this is when I traveled with the school kids' papers. So, and they're easy. They're just in a package, that I put in my suitcase. So let's see. It would have been exposed just once. All of them would have. And then washed them out in the shower of the place where we were staying in Venice and different places. So that would preserve them. The one that's paler, that would have been some different sun exposure. So that's why it turned out that color. There's a little strip up at the top that I soaked in coffee. You can get closer and see that. So that has kind of a darker look to it. So there are lots of different ways you can work with cyanotype. There's some on the back wall that it won't show on the screen, but that were dipped in, you can see some that look kind of darkish looking, and those botanicals were then dipped in kind of a peroxide that took some of the blue out of them, and then I soaked them in coffee, so it gave that kind of sunburned, darkish look before I added. Laura's told me this is a curator's nightmare, that coffee doesn't last. I learned this other day, but something is going to last, and I think anybody who wants to buy one of those and put it on their wall, it's going to be up there, Maybe your grandchildren will find that it's faded or something, but it'll still show. Did that answer some of that question?
Hi.
Hey, Dave.
I was noticing there's a halo, a pink sort of color going on around that. So is it paper? Is it a colored paper behind it?
No, it's fluorescent paint.
It's fluorescent paint, okay. And then I started looking at your presentation of everything, and there's very few work that's framed. So do you see the environment as being where the work is showing? Like sometimes it's flowing, it's hanging from in air. Do you consider the space of where your work is shown?
I am afraid I don't. I have this thing that's going on. There's some people who say they get blocked. I have this river that's kind of moving through me. So I just keep working and the work keeps coming. I don't particularly plan where it's going to be shown or anything like that. I do know that there are issues, like if you're working on paper, then it might need to be behind glass. And I have carefully put everything behind museum glass. And other artists tell me I'm crazy because it's too expensive, but I don't want anything to glare, you know, when you're looking at it. So those are framed that way. I also use wax a good bit. So I use encaustic, which is heated beeswax and a tree rosin. And I have, you know, special ventilation in my studio. And you'll see on some of these, like I told you I used wax on here. On the one you saw kind of behind you on the wall there, everyone saw that in the video, that's called Adrift. That first of all, it was done under glass. I put the cyanotype process there, put the algae in there, and then left it out for like 24 hours. So it was there morning, noon, night, the next day, and the chemical mixture started dividing, which I kind of love. So you can see all that there, and then later, when I washed them out, then I could start adding some sort of little bits of color in there. Again, sort of thinking of hybrid life forms. I have covered that with wax. So that is cold wax, not necessarily, this is getting real geeked out. Does everybody really want to hear all this? The students are saying, yeah. So you mix the beeswax with a solvent, Gamsol or one of those, so it kind of melts it. So I can rub it with wax, so it's a perfectly good covering. So that's on a couple of those on that wall, actually, that have been covered with that or encaustic, which is the heated beeswax.
Anne, would you talk a little bit about the creation of the navigation wall, your painting there? I know you had, you know, a very specific idea about using the weather maps. But this is not what I imagined would result. And I'm wondering how much of this was one of your process painting experiences, or did this match exactly a predetermined intention?
So can you tell me what you expected?
I guess I expected something closer to what the weather maps looked like. More, not rectilinear, but more parallel lines, more, in a way, rigid. And this, what has resulted to me, looks like it has so much more movement and is more gentle. The lines have vitality, but they're not as, I don't know, rigid as what we saw in the weather map. And it coordinates so beautifully with the imagery in the works around them on the wall. I'm just struck by how beautiful it is and would love to hear more about how all that happened.
Okay. So we did, I don't know if we have any of those transparencies with us.
They're far, far away.
There. And you can see some on the website, I think, that shows the student working. I wanted to get something that could be linear, so it could be read. So that was a certain abstraction that we wanted to do there. So this is true to the polar, you know, dip and the storm that was coming in. All of these are taken from that we did have in a transparency. Let's see, this was harder to do because we did trace some of the lines of what the whole snow pattern storm look like. This is kind of the shape that was all along the East Coast and was coming along, and using some of the colors that were in the, what would you say, what was that? Her, what's the term, you know, when you get the colors?
The satellite images?
Well, the imagery that comes from NOAA or whatever, you can make it just in the, they were like the different snow depths. So you'd have deep purple, you know, like this is, God, out in the Sierra, they've got 48 feet of snow right now. We're looking at that. So some of these, you know, are some of the colors, but we didn't use all of them. Some of them in here had wind speed, which was incredible when you saw the kind of wind that was coming in with these. So it just felt like it could get too confusing if we tried to use all the colors and everything. So again, this was, and Dr. Warren was very supportive. I said, so I've done this poetic interpretation of, you know, of your images. She says, well, that's exactly what we do. She's, as a scientist, and she's, I understand, a meteorologist, that you do these layers. Because I wanted it to read, you know, to be, and it's art. So. And you see these shapes a lot. I mean, I'm a painter, so you just see the way that I work. And some of this, like I was saying when Rue was helping me, we had to get it done. Of course, we started on Thursday and Friday. We needed to finish this, and we had short periods of time when the classes were actually here. So this was me up here with, you know, my amazing assistant, just kind of finishing up this wall so we could get this done. And it does look like the way I work, you know, some of that.
And I think maybe we have time for one more question to the group. Excellent. I'm going to pass this over.
Do you have like any favorite memories that are tied to any of the art pieces that are on display today?
Favorite memories?
Like maybe that happened during the process or something?
I want to say maybe a favorite memory, maybe not during the process, but during the long time that I was making it to be here, which is the Earth, Sky, Water image. It's the big canvas over here on the wall. It went on for, a number of years in a way, that when I first printed it, those strange, we dragged it into the water and dragged it out, and those strange shapes appeared there that you see in the sky, and for about a year I hung it vertically and in the studio, and then turned it another way, and it started appearing like maybe this is the cosmos, something in the sky, and these are, you know, so anyway, for a long period of time I worked on that, and then hand-dyed different of the fabric in there that was embroidered. So with that, I have a lot of really good memories and working in that and what it became. But I would say working with the students and the collaboration, there was a lot that went on in here, any particular thing that was just so heartwarming. It was probably my favorite part of it. Working with the students, I mean, you guys are just, you know, great to work with. Gary said I was so different when I came back that night. You know, I was like lit up. So that's totally, I guess, the whole experience of working with you. You know, it was just so neat. You were so you're young, you're enthusiastic, you got ideas, and I loved, when I could, talking to you about what your interests are and sort of hearing your hopes and dreams. And we did a lot of talking and connecting, but not enough, with some of you. I wish I had talked more with some of you. But that's a favorite memory. Yeah, it was cool.
Well, I think that's actually a great place to end, because you all can do more connecting and talking with Anne for the rest of the afternoon. We have a reception that will be up until 4-ish. In the other gallery, there's food and beverages, and she will be here until then, and you can talk with her directly. So thank you, Anne, very much. And
Thank you.